When I discovered hidden cameras in my new home, I thought I was the new star of someone else's reality show. Little did Jordan know, I had a spectacular plan for a grand finale. As I stood frozen in the kitchen, my gaze locked on the little blinking red eye of deception hidden behind my fridge. A tsunami of rage and disbelief crashed over me. I mean, truly, who in their right mind plants cameras in their own house? Was this some sort of twisted game? Did Jordan, the former owner with his slicked back hair and devilish grin, wake up one morning and think, you know what would be fun? Turning my life into a 24/7 reality show for the unsuspecting new owners? I could almost hear him cackling behind that charming mask of deception, his glossy tailored suit gleaming in the glow of the cameras, smugly watching my bewildered existence unfold. Who did this guy think he was? This was my safe haven, my sanctuary, not some episode of Big Brother Neighborhood Edition. I imagined all the wildly inappropriate moments the cameras must have caught already, like the time I accidentally walked into the bathroom with my cat, or when I serenaded my houseplants after a glass of wine, though now I was less concerned with impressing them, and more horrified that I was giving Jordan unwarranted amusement. Fueled by indignation, I quickly set out on a room-by-room reconnaissance mission, transforming my cottage into a bizarre spy thriller. I rifled through drawers, flung open cupboards, and scoured every nook and cranny, convinced that stealthily placed cameras were afoot, like some demented surprise at a birthday party where the only gifts were existential dread and betrayal. With each minor discovery, a weirdly placed mirror, a plug that seemed just a smidge too bulky, I felt the red flags fluttering violently, almost shouting at me, "Alex, wake up! This is not fine!" My hands trembled as I found another blinking light, this one a little hidden from view in the laundry room, peeking out between my slightly disheveled old towels that I had not yet lavished with a color strategy treatment. My mind raced, contemplating how Jordan managed to be so crafty. Did he have a degree in espionage, or was he just a supervillain in the guise of a charming neighbor? I couldn't decide what was worse, the invasion or the ridiculous incompetence of it all. Once I managed to pull it together, it occurred to me that I wasn't just mad. I was a walking embodiment of righteous fury. This was a crime, a literal invasion of privacy, and I was feeling particularly inspired by every true crime documentary I'd ever watched. I half expected to be approached at any moment by a well-meaning neighbor armed with a casserole and a concealed badge. "Sorry, I just happened to notice a camera while dropping off my famous lasagna." To make matters worse, the idea of Jordan somewhere, munching popcorn and giggling maniacally at my misadventures, made my blood boil. Each tap of my finger against the surfaces, counters, shelves, even the baseboards, felt like a relentless countdown toward confronting this weasel of a man. The only other reference I could compare this living nightmare to was that one time I had a roommate who navigated life like it was an online dating app, plenty of charm, no boundaries. With my heart still pounding like a drum in an absurd parade, I decided to reach out to Sam, my colorful neighbor with a flair for vintage styles and eccentric holds on reality. If anyone could understand this crazed spy situation and dissect it like the fascinating yet ultimately self-destructive exhibition that it was Sam. Dressed in their always quirky overalls, they arrived moments later, eyebrows shooting skyward as I spilled the craziness with dramatic flair. "You have got to be kidding me," they gasped, their mouth practically a perfect O of shock. "Does he always track his tenants? Or is this just new and thrilling territory for your former owner?" I couldn't help but bask in the absurdity of it all, my anger simmering into bewildered laughter as Sam concocted ridiculous theories involving secret agents and hidden documents hidden inside ceramic frogs. The atmosphere shifted from mere outrage to a shared sense of disbelief, a comedic caper unfolding in real time. Sam's enthusiasm was infectious. Not only were they my sounding board for absurd theories and sympathetic rants, but their genuine quirkiness promised an unyielding support system in this strange saga. It became less about merely uprooting the cameras and more about reclaiming my space with style. We devised a plan that involved some DIY sleuthing, armed with nothing but a hefty dose of courage, questionable YouTube tutorials, and a recycling bin full of snacks. We would outsmart Jordan's little game. I envisioned not just removing the cameras. Oh no, that wouldn't be enough. Instead, I wanted to structure a glorious form of retribution, a chance for him to witness, all too vividly, the chaos that would have ensued had he actually succeeded in his little spy setup. He thinks he's the puppet master of our lives? Bring it on! My voice chirped with rebellious energy, like the triumphant music you'd expect right before the hero takes down the villain. So, armed with our playful defiance, Sam and I made our way through the house, devising a plan to flip the script, throwing together home-made disguises, inflatable props, and the occasional imaginative performance piece that could have earned us an off-Broadway review. Who knew that a couple of friends could turn ridiculous fear into empowering humor? But there was more at stake than a quirky theatrical production. We wanted our home back, stripped of Jordan's invasive tendencies, and restored to the sanctuary we envisioned. As we laughed and plotted, a bizarre sense of justice flickered inside me. Jordan may have thought he had all the power. He may have believed himself the star of this unsolicited reality show. But little did he know I was preparing a grand premiere for him that would utterly reverse the tables. What scandalous spectacles awaited him in the grand investigation of an unsuspecting adventure? Our first foray into this subterfuge started in the living room, an open-space wilderness where we could freely unleash our creativity. I rummaged through my collection of vintage home decor, which had initially seemed like nothing more than a charming array of mismatched coffee mugs and retro wall art, and suddenly saw it as an arsenal for mischief. What if we accessorized all the surveillance? I proposed, eyeing the blinking camera perched on the bookshelf as if it were a misbehaving child. They can't possibly look threatening while draped in a knitted cozy. I laughed, envisioning a warm, knitted blanket fashioned into a stylish cape for the invasive little devices watched around the home. Sam, not too far behind in our plotting, immediately leaped onto the idea, their eyes shining with excitement. We could sprinkle some fake flowers around too? What could be more innocent than a decorative garden in the living room? The stage was set. We were transforming this invasive tech into a botanical buffet, and I was laughing at the sheer absurdity while plotting our whimsical revamp of Jordan's setup. Energized by our vision, we stripped the living room down, creating a temporary zone of chaos as we assembled our makeshift disguises. Heavily armed not just with supplies, but with a solid commitment to absurdity, we decked out the cameras in garlands and over-the-top floral arrangements, while also placing googly eyes on strategic surfaces, because if my privacy was going to be invaded, we might as well invade those devices with the hilarious menace of, well, googly eyes. As I fashioned a bright pink tutu for one unfortunate lens, the weight of my fury started to lift. This, Sam declared dramatically, is just what I was hoping for. A freak protest against the tyranny of our former dictator. I cackled, now in full DIY mode, tossing craft supplies like a whirlwind, channeling my inner artist with each ridiculous addition, reinforcing our rebellion. In moments, the living room transformed from an entity of surveillance to one of flamboyant riot, clearly making it a disturbed sanctuary for poor Jordan, if he were ever to see it. By the time we carefully moved to the bathroom, where, judging by the bloated nature of my anxiety, I half expected to find cameras hidden beneath the toilet seats, and sealing all possible exits because why not be thorough? I felt like I was immersed in a slapstick CBS sitcom of sorts. The faux flower theme followed me like a loyal dog, and before I knew it, the lens peeking behind the mirror had been smothered in plastic peonies, creating a sickly sweet aroma conducive to chiding any camera crew hoping to stick around for the unhinged spectacle. "Don't mind the decor, Mr. Camera. We just want to brighten up your clandestine existence a little," I shouted while hanging a tiny collection of mismatched multicolored shower curtains. I couldn't tell if the laughter felt liberating or just a mask for the frustration tethered underneath. Either way, with Sam thrillingly elbow-deep in the decor of disruption next to me, I felt as if I had gained an unsung ally in reclaiming control over my errant castle. It was during our staging of the final act, employing a multitude of inflatable lawn gnomes in the central hallway for optimal strategic placement, that we unleashed the climax of this harebrained drama, sticking the gnomes to various wall corners like they were eccentric sentinels of privacy. I couldn't help but feel that we'd somehow escalated this tightrope stroll into a full-on circus act. "No one would ever suspect a gnome-tastic surveillance outfit," Sam exclaimed, wheezing with laughter as they desperately positioned one gnome comically high on a bookshelf, standing with pride as the apparent guardian of our haunted home. Between the knitted capes, exuberant googly eyes, and quirky gnomes standing vigil, my frustration transformed into unrestrained hilarity. Jordan's divine ambitions for orchestrating our lives were swarmed, quirked out, and completely uprooted. At this point, the spy cameras weren't meant to be covert. They've evolved into whimsical witnesses of the absurd, I proclaimed, striking a pose with my arms crossed as though I was the leading protagonist, now taking control of my own reality show, one rife with suspicious gnome antics and flair. As we collected the last remnants of our renowned production, giggling like children at a sleepover deeply embroiled in mischief, I stopped and suddenly found myself facing the biggest question surfacing: how to properly deliver the payments due for our figurative takedown of Jordan. Would I send him an invitation to our extravagant gnome-filled soiree? A wry smile spread across my lips as I imagined Jordan's reaction. His mouth agape, his design of invasive sleuthing unfurling into comic dread as he finds himself outclassed at his own reality game. However, just as I was reveling in these imaginings, another sobering thought crawled through. Reflection on why I, of all people, was engaged in such bizarre measures, instead of calling the cops or confronting him outright like a sane individual would. I chuckled sheepishly, humbled by the ridiculous fanaticism that had spiraled into this inspired rebellion. Perhaps it was about standing firm, setting the stage, figuratively and literally, to not only reclaim my home but deliver a tragicomic comeback I hoped Jordan would remember as long as he lived. I had to remind myself, as the inflatable gnome stood at the ready for its close-up, that every bit of artifice combined in our playful coup was about figuring out how to reclaim what once felt lost amid deception. As we caught our breath, the adrenaline pumping through our veins juxtaposed against the silliness of the whole endeavor, I realized that, despite the entanglement of petty rage, friendship had infused the absurd challenge with camaraderie, laughter, and a defined plan. Artistic mayhem on the stage of our lives. What if we throw a party to introduce the Gnome Brigade? I mused aloud, grappling with the idea of serving up wild appetizers, while Jordan silently squirmed outside the raucous gathering unfolding inside our modest walls. There was no turning back now. It became a gleeful whim that meant so much more than some annoying surveillance cameras. What delightful threats would the invasive owner of this realm face next? The next phase of our theatrical rebellion was a swift, yet impressively dramatic pivot toward transforming my newfound sanctuary into a gladiator ring for a showdown with the notorious spy himself, Jordan Price. As I stood in the glow of my now whimsical battleground, each improbably decorated corner of the living room felt charged with defiance. A bouquet of feigned innocence surrounded us, made tenfold more potent by the absurdity of inflatable lawn gnomes, floral arrangements, and googly eye crafts. Sam, who had transformed into my partner in crime, furiously composed an RSVP for our forthcoming soiree, the Gnome Gala. Oh yes, we were going to celebrate, not just survival, but splendidly thwarting the baleful ambitions of a man who once held dominion over our privacy. My heart raced, not merely from the impending confrontation, but from the exhilaration coursing through my veins as I dared to entertain my latent recklessness. How deliciously ironic would it be to throw a party, complete with whimsical decor, right in the clutches of the very man who thought he could orchestrate our lives. As our madcap evening unfolded, I could practically feel the power dynamics shifting. Jordan had conveniently forgotten that he had sold me not only his charming abode, but an invitation to a riveting game of cat and mouse, a game I was intent on playing with every last ounce of pizzazz. What kind of snacks should we serve? Nothing sinister, but maybe a few creepy cookies to keep the vibes confusing. I joked, a fire lit under my somewhat mischievous ideas. My laughter danced around the room, mingling with that sumptuous energy that only comes from plotting laughter-fueled schemes. Sam jumped into the spirit of it all, suggesting a punch they humorously dubbed Gnome's Revenge. I marveled at the fearless creativity erupting from this absurd situation. The ridiculousity was overwhelming, but in all the right ways. My anxiety was melting faster than ice in a summer sun. Was this a master plan, a foolish prank, or an unexpected therapy session wrapped in gnomes and DIY culture? I wasn't sure, but what I did know was that I felt alive and happy. In assembling the final touches for our impending showdown, I hit upon the absolute zenith of genius: themed costumes. If I was going to stand toe-to-toe with Jordan, I would do it dressed in devil, make hair fabulously. Enter the Gnome Brigade. Armed with hats crafted from bright paper plates, adorned with sparkly tinsel, and faced with decorative facial battle gear painted into absurd, cartoonish grins, we pushed our aesthetic boundaries to hilariously lofty heights. We can even make a grand entrance, theatrical, melodramatic, I declared in wild enthusiasm, envisioning us marching to the front door to greet him as if welcoming royalty to the castle. Sam's laughter echoed through the rooms, their curls bouncing with each breathless snort. It was as if we were channeling performing arts majors from a corny theater class, relishing in that sweet battle cry echoing between our heads. We refuse to be mere characters in a drama. We are the playwrights. As the appointed hour approached, the air crackled not with fear, but with a delicious cocktail of anticipation and mischief. Strange adrenaline urged me on. My heart raced like a locomotive, and my mind buzzed with potential lines for Jordan's inevitable shock face. Just how shocked could a creature like him actually be? Would his meticulously polished facade crack under the weight of an inflatable gnome blockade? Oh, the thrill! What if we literally block his access to the house with gnomes? Like some kind of ironic gatekeeping? Sam twinkled with glee at the thought. And voila, now we had a living art installation bolted on the threshold of hilarity. The front door stood like a daunting fortress, the gnomes standing at their post with chest-puffed pride as they diverted anyone daring to trespass into our kooky peril. Moments later, a sharp knock on the door sliced through our shenanigans, sending a thrill of incredulous terror racing through me. Well, here goes nothing, I shouted as Sam and I transformed ourselves back into our impeccable Gnome Brigade personas, adorned in our makeshift hats and dramatic grins. As I flung the door open, revealing an utterly bemused Jordan, today's augury of ill intent, I could see disbelief washing over his finely suited countenance. "Welcome, esteemed guest," I proclaimed, spreading my arms wide as if inviting a supreme dignitary into our haven of chaos. The bemusement danced clearly in his eyes, rapidly transforming into horror as he surveyed the unlikely scene. The gnome-laden barricade, the flowers sprouting forth like an oasis of ridicule, and me, champion of the parodic not-so-humble abode. With every ounce of wit I had cultivated throughout our tempestuous journey, I unleashed an avalanche of jingling sarcasm. "Can I interest you in a delightful suspension of your invasive curiosities?" I chimed theatrically, gesturing to the punch bowl. "It's called Gnome's Revenge, a fittingly ironic concoction to celebrate both our resilient spirit and the bungling account of your dubious landlord antics." Sam stifled a laugh as we both braced for Jordan's proportional shock and a sharp rebuttal. But dear reader, in all my pursuits of triumph against the tyranny of the past, little could prepare me for the look on his face, a twisted splendor of anxiety and denial, and then the unmistakable clenching of righteousness underlying disbelief. We were no longer voiceless renters in his omniscient gaze. We, the spirited architects of our absurd reality, stood poised for a jubilant reckoning. As I took in the expression of incredulity washing over Jordan's slicked back hair, I could scarcely contain my mirth. Would the tide of his offenses not only spiral into a cascade of defeat, but also force upon him the bitter aftertaste of what true poking fun felt like? The reverberation of our shared laughter, ignited by the audacity of Gnome's Revenge, would inevitably shape more than just our immediate surroundings. No, it was destined to dance memorably through the tapestry of our friendship. With my spirits soaring and a mischievous twinkle in my eye, I pressed on. "So, Jordan, how does it feel, knowing that you opened the door not just to your intended surveillance, but welcomed an avalanche of colorful whimsy instead?" The question hung in the air, vibrant and unapologetic, awaiting his response with delicious weight. His expression danced between shock and denial, like a frightened rabbit cornered by brightly colored gnomes. I stood tall in my absurd hat, the tinsel glittering under the artificial rays of lazy string lights. This was a facade I never thought I would embrace. Champion of chaos, king of the gnome-themed rebellion. The sight of my former oppressor floundering brought me great delight. "You didn't think you could trespass on our lives without a little festive pushback, did you, Jordan?" I leaned into my role, fueling both my bravado and the insane absurdity of the moment. Sam stood beside me, radiating an effervescent energy, their punch-filled ladle resembling a wand of mischief. The power dynamics were shifting rapidly as Jordan's polished composure crumbled, leaving behind shards of an utterly bewildered man. Jordan opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a goldfish grasping for air. Are you serious right now?" His disbelief was palpable, like a stench left behind after a comedian's missed punchline. "You think this is funny?" I tilted my head, a tiny smirk gracing my lips as I conjured a touch of melodrama. "Oh, darling, this isn't just funny. This is a celebration of our reclaiming of privacy. A fiesta of absolute defiance against your creepy, peeping Tom tendencies." As I spoke, I circulated toward the punch bowl, dramatically scooping a glitzy glass for him, not daring to miss the apex of theatricality. Care for some gnome's revenge? Nothing sinister, just fruity delight with a splash of indignation? To my utter amusement, Jordan's perfectly sculpted grin faltered. A crack formed at the edges of his carefully maintained facade. He glanced nervously at the gaggle of inflatable gnomes stationed as gatekeepers, then at Sam, whose colorful overalls became a beacon of mischief. It was practically poetic, the dawn of an anti-hero extravaganza, with me as the reluctant protagonist standing amidst an ocean of gnomes willing to fight my battles and punch through the veil of his relentless surveillance. What an ingenious ruse you concocted, Jordan. Bravo! I clapped slowly, drawing out each noise to awaken my pretending audience. But might I suggest putting your carefully crafted charms back in your tailored suit pockets? Because here, privacy matters more than your self-serving agenda. Amidst my grinning flurry of eloquence, it dawned on me. He wasn't just the deceitful previous owner. He was an absolute tragicomic character. My mind raced through scenarios of what this man would do next. Would he simply stand in the doorway, clearly shaken by this turn of events? Or would he summon the rage born from entitlement, an eruption destined to break our whimsical wall of gnomes? I could, perhaps stupidly, feel a mix of exhilaration and concern for what his fuming facade would unleash. But then, remembering all those evenings spent wondering when I would finally triumph over the insatiable invasiveness of someone who had twisted my sense of home, I caught a second wind of courage. This was my domain now. I was the captain of our gnome brigade. Careful, Jordan. I took a step closer, lowering my voice just a touch. If you try to battle us with your oh-so-charming composure, you'll find us quite the foe. Our gnome brigade fuels itself with sheer determination and a lot of punch. With that dramatic flourish, I raised my cup, showing him the vibrant concoction stewing within, the essence of zeal, hilarity, and a dash of sweet revenge. Sam chortled beside me, clearly enchanted by the chaotic rhythm of my tongue. It fueled my theatrical energy even more. This wasn't just revenge. It felt like a theatrical revelry, the perfect blend of exasperation and jubilation all at once. If only this were captured on one of his hidden cameras for posterity's sake. Jordan finally regained a semblance of composure, but his amusement was fleeting. "What you're doing is illegal," he sputtered, and for a brief moment my heart sank as if I had stepped into a pit of quicksand. But then my defiance kicked in like a lightning bolt. There was no place for fear in the Gnome Kingdom. "Actually, darling, what you did could be construed as illegal too?" I shot back, slinging my distant anguish with delightful, petulant glee. "Not thrilled about being watched while showering, were you?" With a sprinkle of panache, the theft of privacy was suddenly the star of our melodrama, and it was my moment to shine. Your underhanded antics may be cloaked in the guise of business, but my friend, so is our retaliatory party. Things are different here, I continued, the Gnome Brigade echoing my surreality, every word intertwining with the absurdity enveloping us. Where once you played Monarch, now we hold court and you're in the gnome spotlight. Should we roll out the carpet for the next act? Perhaps a recounting of your previous tenant's misfortunes? The twist? Your manipulative deception is the headliner. Each laugh weeded out the last traces of lingering anxiety within me. This ridiculous affair was burgeoning into an exhilarating theatrical dream, and I was its star. With Sam clutching a pot of glitter and foam blocks, the whole absurdity primed for a dazzling finale. How utterly perfect it was that karma could indeed travel on the gnome laden back of creativity. The essence of karmic justice loomed deliciously on the horizon, and somehow, deep in the recesses of my audacious heart, I wondered, how would Jordan navigate this kaleidoscope of his own making? Would he continue his feeble attempts to rattle us? Or was he about to experience the absurdest turn of fate that invited laughter instead of rage? Jordan's face took on the color of sour milk as he squirmed in the overwhelming spotlight of our gnomified haunt. Here he was, a one-time sovereign of surveillance, reduced to a bewildered figure caught in a theatrical farce, with inflatable grotesques gaping at him like grouchy spectators. I could almost hear the collective gasp from all the hidden cameras he had once so smugly deployed. "So, Jordan," I declaimed with a flourish, "how does it feel to be watched? I must say it's quite the immersive experience." I leaned in further, floating on the dramatic currents beckoning me closer, as if to unveil an unreleased blockbuster. The only thing missing was popcorn, which prompted a sudden mental image of gnomes passing around snacks, A gnome apocalypse of cotton candy and marshmallow fluff, if you will. Wouldn't that leave him flabbergasted? But what was truly delicious was that glimmer of realization dawning on Jordan, that flicker of understanding that his charade had morphed from being a controller to merely a spectator in his own twisted reality show. Gone was his bravado. Instead, he seemed to transform into a teetering Jenga tower, totally vulnerable and ready to collapse at the hands of an overwhelmed, unstoppable force of misunderstood tenants. I took another sip of my gnome's revenge, letting the sweet tang dance on my tongue as I relished the moment. "How was the view from your cameras?" I asked innocently, my voice dripping with acerbic sweetness. "Any particularly scandalous screenshots of our royal gnome court, perhaps?" Sam erupted with laughter, their infectious humor clearing the tension like a reset button. And in that cacophony, it felt as though we were fusing into this manic, unified resilience. Then came the bombshell. Jordan's defense mechanisms kicked in like a malfunctioning robot desperate to reboot. "You're twisting the narrative. This is about protecting my privacy, not yours," he hollered, veins popping from his temples like overripe fruit threatening to burst. I couldn't help but let out a snort laugh as the absurdity of it all cracked open. "Oh, darling, how noble of you," I shot back, and I swear I could feel the gnomes smirking at him. "Your privacy evaporated the moment you unleashed hidden cameras in every nook and cranny of this house. What's next? Charm us with a monologue about how you're protecting us from our own lives." The very air was electric. The absurdity radiated through the room like swirls of glitter. How sweet it was to watch this once powerful man flounder in his own stupidity, caught between a ludicrous defense and the mangled truth of his deceptions. Stumbling backwards, he nearly tripped over the inflatable lawn ornaments, which was almost poetic. "You can't just go and," he sputtered, looking for a plausible escape while still fumbling with those faux elegance pruned from his slick persona. "By burying yourself in this gnome-filled chaos, you're only going to ruin your own lives. This could be career suicide." "Oh, please, career suicide?" At that point, I was no longer an innocent victim in this ridiculous game, but the unapologetic maestro orchestrating a symphony of surreal defiance. "Career suicide? Oh, Jordan, I didn't realize we had stepped into a comedy show." Laughter bubbled from my lips, fueling the performance further. "Let's recap your career. Surveying unsuspecting tenants through hidden cameras and spitting out artistic lies. The drama is astounding. One would think you're the protagonist in a ludicrous spy thriller gone delightfully wrong." Jordan, for all his over-the-top curses and threats, was losing steam, and with it, my sense of urgency to protect what was once my slice of tranquility. What I had apprised as the rumor of disquietude turned into a glitzy carnival of rebellion, and it surged through our makeshift gnome kingdom like the best kind of adrenaline. "But tell me, what do all your masked cameras see of our glorious rebellion?" I taunted, putting extra emphasis on glorious. "I imagine it delivers quite the ratings boost for your series, Following My Tenants, a real-life horror show." The clang of laughter in the air rang beautifully, creating an opera of defiance that both thrilled and delighted me. How silly it felt to think I had once tasked myself with playing peacekeeper. What I truly yearned for was to render Jordan's devious little schemes impotent by turning every hidden camera into mere artifacts of a grander, more ludicrous performance. As I plummeted deeper into my role of the anti-hero, I noticed a glimmer of desperation reshape on Jordan's face. Was that a flicker of acknowledgement creeping in? Humiliation dripped from every angle of his stoically reassembled image. "You're not winning," he shouted, his tone wavering into less of a threat and more of a plea. "Oh, but I was winning. Every gnome surrounding us stood as sentinels of my absurdly majestic triumph." "Might I suggest a more historical perspective, Jordan?" I jested with a haughty sway in the step that would have put royalty to shame. "The specter of your past, the one that haunted us for so long, is being rendered impotent by the sheer outrageousness of your own creations." I lifted my cup in an exaggerated toast, a bright pink concoction sparkling with zest and irony. "To rebelling against gnome squatters and the anxieties that plague normal people like us." Just as I concluded my theatrical oration about the whimsical importance of reclaiming my space, Sam poured a light spray of glitter over the punch bowl, letting it glimmer like gems in sunlight, sparking chaotic fits of laughter from both of us. "Careful, Jordan. We're not beyond shattering an expectation or two," Sam quipped, bringing one of those glorious vintage accessories into the fray. Jordan's lips pressed together in a sour line. He looked as if he was desperately trying to execute a strategic retreat from a battle of wits he never truly understood. And there it was, the delightfully savory notion that not only was I winning this bizarre confrontation, but Jordan was fumbling hard, grasping at the frayed ends of an opportunity he never deserved. The sweet, intoxicating taste of vindication permeated the air, and I craved more. What awaited us next was the cherry on this chaotic cake I had so giddily baked, served fresh, and oh so beautifully absurd. In the whirlwind of spectacle that morning had become, I couldn't help but feel euphoric. The world felt like a stage where light poured in, not just through the windows of our newly adorned gnome kingdom, but through the sheer ridiculousness of our predicament. I mean, come on, how had I, a humble tenant of a whimsically haunted home, become a literal gladiator in the coliseum of real estate nightmares? My fingers flew over the screen of my phone, each keystroke broadcasting the latest on my wildly successful protest. I snapped photos of the very gnomes that had stirred us to action, juxtaposed against Jordan's increasingly chaotic expressions. Each post became more outrageous. Day 12 of gnome monitoring. The gnome sentry is holding strong against the encroaching darkness of predatory property dealings. My followers weren't just engaging. They were clamoring for more, sharing my posts into the ether, elevating my struggle into something akin to a folk legend. Even the building tension between me and Jordan turned into entertainment, a bizarre real-life soap opera with my friends in the comments section as co-stars. As the captivating threads of digital connection spread across the platform, I felt a fresh wave of adrenaline crash over me. What was once a private battle morphed into a collective fight against the absurdity of real estate scams. The frenzy transformed my outrage into a unifying force, rallying others who had similarly been blindsided by manipulative sellers. It soon became less about my individual plight and more about awakening a legion of renovation warriors ready to shout in one loud chorus of discontent. Each message of solidarity fueled my momentum, igniting a fire within me that sparked with fervor. Jordan might have built his surveillance empire on the backs of unsuspecting innocents, but here we were, rising from the ashes like a phoenix, reborn in community rebellion against the sheer audacity of surveillance capitalism. My gnome-feeding frenzy felt positively electric, offering hope to the countless voices lost in the shadows of dubious rental agreements. However, I was riding the crest of adrenaline, surfing the waves of outrage, and it hit me. The local news outlets, intrigued by our antics, had caught wind of our DIY revolution. I received call after call from reporters eager to explore this absolutely ludicrous tale. "Can we interview you live? We want to take this story national," one excited producer chirped over the phone. Oh, the idea of broadcasting my saga to the world was simply too delicious to resist. I shuddered with excitement, adjusting my oversized sweater and trying to exude an air of casual confidence. The gnomes, in their silent glory, would surely shine in the background, framing me like eccentric trophies of our newfound reign over the insanity of our situation. "Yes, yes," I yelled into the receiver, almost spilling my vibrant drink in eager celebration. "Put me on air. Let's broadcast the brass tacks of this real estate circus." The day of the news segment arrived faster than I anticipated, swirling with anticipation and the electric buzz of hope that the truth might finally secede from Jordan's elaborate web of lies. As cameras flashed, and my gnomified sanctuary became the performance backdrop for my anti-hero monologue, I felt an intoxicating mix of joy and terrifying vulnerability wash over me. I knew the story wasn't just mine. A swell of camaraderie had built around me, each soul bound by the audacity of Jordan's betrayals, living proof of the absurdity that the housing market had become. I opened my mouth, helmeted with charisma and bottled-up rage, inadvertently transforming my gnome garden into a shrine of vigilant solidarity. "And the moral of this fairy tale?" I proclaimed, sweeping my arm dramatically toward Sam, who giggled inelegantly with gnome-themed decorations tangled around their outfit, making for some deliciously entertaining visual irony. "Don't trust anyone who offers you filtered views of their life in exchange for your dignity and privacy." As I continued, attempting to juggle both informative content and the suspense of our ongoing saga, I caught a glimpse of Jordan lurking in the back, like the villain he was. His slicked back hair now looked frayed, a cracked visage of desperation. The way he shifted from foot to foot was like watching an unmasked jester fall out of character, quailing under the weight of his own sins. A gleam of righteous vengeance kindled my spirit. Every word I spoke was a dagger aimed at the heart of his audacity. This isn't just about me, dear viewers. This is about the countless souls like mine who've fallen prey to the greed of opportunists hiding behind flashy charm and working to reshape invasive source codes of surveillance into exciting storylines. My fervor mounted, sweeping everyone in attendance into a frenzy that resembled a misty fairy tale revitalized into a battle epic. This was my moment of catharsis in all its glorious absurdity, and I danced at the forefront of a revolution. As the camera drew closer, and I shared vivid details of our ongoing rebellion, I decided my closing remarks had to encapsulate boldness, defiance, and glittering humor. So, let's take Jordan's gnome heavy, camera-laden conga line of chaos and switch the narrative, shall we? I winked at the camera, a mischievous grin splitting my face as the crowd erupted into cheers. When one door closes, just bolt all the windows and wear your houseplants as disguises. To the gnomes, to our unapologetic gallivanting, and to reclaiming our spaces in flamboyant rebellion. The climax of our wild show drew forth a wave of noise that echoed through the lot, punctuated by cackles and encouragements, as I raised my drink high, buoyed by the newfound spirit of those who rallied for awareness. What was a two-part plot became a raucous social movement. How potent and liberating was that realization? And just like that, I had gone from unsuspecting tenant to a whirlwind of activism, all thanks to Jordan's repulsive little surveillance scheme. As the camera crew packed up after my rousing speech, seriously, where were my grips and gaffers? Sam and I retreated back into my now decidedly less sinister home, which was transformed into a haven for giggles and gnome-induced camaraderie. The moment we crossed the threshold, a sense of euphoria settled over me like a weighted blanket of victory. You know, I might just get a Gnome Liberation Army tattoo, I declared, pacing across the living room and dramatically gesturing toward what I would now rebrand as the Karma Corner. Of course, I would get creative with the design. A cheeky gnome brandishing a tiny protest sign sounded just about right. Or maybe a t-shirt? The possibilities are endless, but the true kicker? I expected a stream of messages from Jordan, pleading his case, maybe even attempting to charm his way back into my good graces with a barrage of sorry not sorry excuses. I mean, how stupid did he think I was? To even think I'd fallen prey to his web of deceit? To my utter bewilderment, I woke to complete radio silence from him. Was he in the witness protection program, curled up in his tailor-made suit, sobbing into a pint of ice cream like some sad villain from a rom-com? A deep belly laugh escaped me. I savored the image of him, slick hair disheveled, desperately plotting his next scheme while hiding behind one of his own cameras, hoping the world didn't see who he really was. As the gnome-themed, surreal excitement settled, I decided to capitalize on my newfound fame. Operation Spy House Throne Room Reclamation was officially underway, with Sam as my most loyal sidekick, charming in scruffy vintage attire, a glittering contrast to my oversized sweaters. We armed ourselves with paint, brushes, and half-baked ideas. Suddenly, every room in my home morphed into an unapologetically bright artistic masterpiece. The dining room became a mini gallery of gnome pop art, while the bedroom was doused in colors straight out of a 5-year-old's finger painting, sprinkled with gnome pillows for character, naturally. Each brushstroke was a reclamation of space, funneled through the ridiculousness of our previous realities, and by the time we finished, we could only marvel in delight at our chaotic triumph. My phone buzzed, jerking me back from my creative reverie. Amid chatter of renovations, my social media troll squad, the engaged pals, family, and random followers were eagerly waiting for updates. Even better, the updates were all about Jordan's dimming reputation in the community, fueled by the video snippets of my gnome-fueled tirade and sincere revelations of his creepy surveillance practices. Hey, did you hear? Homebuyers across town are sharing your gnome videos. It's gone absolutely viral, Sam cackled, a whimsical funhouse mirror reflecting our collective relief. The narrative had shifted from hidden cameras to cute gnome costumes, from a broken trust back to a vibrantly painted sanctuary. Who would have thought my life would turn from monotony into, and I quote, full-blown gnome revolution territory? As days morphed into weeks, we solidified our reign, turning the house not just into a canvas, but a community hub. Neighbors flocked to join us for impromptu gatherings under twinkling lights, sipping drinks as we tested out potluck recipes with delightful absurdity. Laughter rolled through the rooms, vivid and untamed, creating more memories than every quiet corner from before. Some nights, I'd catch myself gushing about how extraordinary it was to convert Jordan's dented legacy into a canvas of laughter, a testament to the power of camaraderie over greed. More gnomes became our rallying cry as our mismatched garden flourished into a veritable gnome city. It felt surreal, like every blooming flower marked the end of Jordan's whimsical nightmare and the dawn of our celebration. A community finally reclaiming its spirit. Oh, and then came that glorious morning, buoyant with sunlight filtering through our creative whirlwind. I opened my door to discover the most unexpected sight. Groups of gnome enthusiasts in colorful outfits gathering on the front lawn for a spontaneous festival. Yes, it was a gnome liberation Instagram picnic. Somebody even brought a piñata fashioned like Jordan, much to our collective amusement and horror. Tasteful irony in the flesh. I couldn't help but laugh, heart swelling with a ridiculous pride. The neighbors turned naysayers into allies, transforming into a beautiful mess of exuberance. Come for the gnomes, stay for the camaraderie, we shrieked in unison. I fully embraced the absurdity of it all. As the sun set, bathing the chaos in a golden glow, and laughter diving into the starry night, I thought about what a beautifully twisted tapestry of life we spun. Here I was, no longer just a tenant but a proud homeowner, a brave sentinel against the snare of corporate greed. I raised my glass in a toast towards my scrappy band of gnome warriors, grinning ear to ear, and echoed my mantra. So let's keep living our unapologetic gnome-fueled dreams. And, oh, how sweet it was, because against all odds, destiny had taken the leashes off this wild, whimsical escapade, coaxing us into complete and uninhibited rekindling of what truly mattered. What more could anyone ask for?